Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm James Rink. We have a very special guest here today at Super Soldier Talk with Jimmy Paine. And today we're going to be discussing the USS Eldridge, also known as the Philadelphia experiment. So today, Jimmy will explain how he became crew member of the USS Eldridge in 1962 and also earlier time under the command of German U-boat Captain Oscar Schneider, who was Phil Schneider's father. And we will also be discussing the return of the USS Eldridge in 2023 and Jimmy's request for the community for help with recovering in this vessel, or help assisting the people that are still alive on the vessel anyway. We will also be discussing about the nuclear war, which may happen sometime between 2023 and 2027. So let me go ahead and read a little bio here. Super Soldier Agent Jimmy Paine, a.k.a. Dallas, was in the secret space program from 1959 to 1996. And through time travel is a lot more time than that. But during this specific time, he was a shuttlecraft pilot for the Tall White Warriors at Area 51 and participated in time travel missions with the Montauk Boys at Camp Hero. He also recalls working for Weyland Corporation, where he encountered a xenomorph at LV-426, which the movie Aliens was based off of. He was stationed on Mars, Titan, and the Moon. On Mars, he has seen a broken statue of a giant face of a humanoid on a mission in 1974, along with Duncan O'Finian. He also remembers seeing Tommy knockers and type aliens in a cave on Mars, which were a muscular type of tall grays. On the Moon at Titan, he was stationed at a massive underground base. He was tasked with fighting a monster they called It. It looked like the Montauk monster, type of Bigfoot creature that would gain strength by attacking it. He was also on a secret mission from Vandenberg Air Force Base, the Apollo 20 mission with William Rutledge, which they discovered an oriental-looking humanoid they called EBE, or EB Mona Lisa. Jimmy claims the Apollo 20 footage on YouTube is real, and that was actually our last episode when I brought him on here. We discussed on that. So if you want to send Jimmy a message, you have to just send it to my email. I'll forward it to him. But as long as it's relevant anyway. But anyway, so Jimmy, how are you? Are you there?
Yes, I'm online now.
Great. Thank you for coming in here today. So I started off listening to this recording from Al Bielek about Oscar Schneider. Was actually, he was discussing mostly about Phil Schneider, but so what we know about Oscar Schneider is that he was a U-boat captain for the Germans in World War II, and he brought down 52 vessels, mostly, they were English and French, but they weren't American vessels because it was around 1941 when his U-boat was captured by the Americans, and he was brought to the United States and given a cover identity, not under Project Paperclip, but because this is 41, this predates Project Paperclip was in 1946, but in 41, yeah, so they gave him a cover as a doctor, giving him a diploma from the University of Berkeley, and they claimed he grew up in California. I think he was born in 1906. So, whereas Oscar Schneider died in 1993, and at that point, that's when Phil Schneider was just starting to come out around, I think it was 1994 or 95. But so let's see here. What else did I miss? Okay, so the reason why the Americans brought him into into the Navy, into naval intelligence, as a captain, because he was involved with the time travel experiments in Germany. When he was the age of 14, he was a master machinist, and which is a really difficult thing to achieve at that age. And that's when he was brought into the German military there, into the Navy. So Jimmy, you want to take it from here? What do you say about all that? Does that sound accurate?
It's all accurate, except he wasn't captured by the Americans. He was captured by the French. His boat was charged, and he had to bring his sub up, and that's when he was captured. But he was basically captured by the French, turned over to the American authorities.
All right. So, I guess at what point in your career did you get involved with Oscar Schneider and the Philadelphia experiment?
Well, but back in 1959, I had when I was a real young child, um, we had I was taken aboard a spacecraft, um, and I was examined, and this was not very far from where there was a military Air Force base. That base has since closed down. But what happened um, several weeks after our encounter, we started having uh, what I would call strange occurrences around our property, and these different types of extraterrestrials would enter my home, and so that's how I first became involved. Um, I had accidentally scratched my arm on a rose bush playing around with one of these Ewoks, and the men in the Air Force came to my home, and they collected the Ewok. And but since they saw the little scratch on my arm, they wanted to bring me in because they didn't know what type of disease that those entities carry. And so that's when I was, taken to Nellis Air Force Base and recruited into the program. It was around 1959, and I sort of grew up around in and out around Nellis Air Force Base, Creech Air Force Base, and got to know the Little Grays. I also stayed around the Tall White Warriors. Range 4 Harry is who I mostly dealt with. And I'm also, my teacher was Rachel. She's tall white. And then I had Pamela, the other tall white. Pamela's been there since President Andrew Jackson uh, uh, was was elected. So she's been here since 1835 or so.
So, how did you find out how old these tall whites were?
Well, um, just by growing up around them, I knew they lived a very long time because one of them, Rachel's husband, took one of the craft up in the sky, and the propulsion system failed, and that spacecraft crashed in a ravine, and he was in there for about 3 or 4 days, and I found him in a ravine, and he had broken both of his legs, and well, we got him out, and come to find out that it takes 5 years for his bones to heal. And that's when I started, getting interested. Well, if it takes 5 years for his bones to mend, how long does it take for him to live? And they live anywhere from 700 years to 800 years. That's when I first found out how long they live.
Jimmy, how come they didn't? I mean, surely they have a med bed at Area 51 where they can regenerate their bones quickly.
Actually, when the crash occurred, they did not have a lot of medical equipment here on Earth. So what they did, they they took some electronic parts and made a crude MRI, and they were able to scan his body, and so they're very smart, um, and so that's how they examined him. But both of his legs was crushed real bad in the crash, and you know, um, that's how I found out about that.
So that's why Charles Hall, he said that you weren't allowed to touch the tall whites because their bones were so fragile, and they would kill you if you accidentally did it.
Well, this one was trapped underneath a bunch of electronic equipment that had fell out onto him inside the craft, and he had been trapped in there for about 4 or 5 days. And he asked me to try to pull him out, and I couldn't pull him out because it was so much weight on top of him. And but they don't like to be touched, and you have to remember uh, a common code like mere you can get could be fatal to them. Okay, and so I learned a lot about germs. Uh, you know, to disinfect. Anytime I touched a doorknob, I would get alcohol and wipe it because, like a tall white may come up behind me and grab the doorknob and twist it. So you have to be, very aware of germs, and you don't want to cough on them, and you don't want them to cough on you. So it's courtesy. Try not to cough or go around them when you're not feeling very very well.
Can you? We have a comment here from Joyce. Are the tall white war? How about why don't you explain where these tall white warriors came from? Are they native to Earth? Are they like a breakaway human group? Or I mean, supposedly that bird DNA. Positive, negative, shape shifting abilities.
Well, they have positive attitudes. They also feel pain like we feel pain, and they have feelings like we do. Um, they're not shapeshifters. So they're not from Earth. There's somewhere out in the Aquarius star system, from the best that I can pinpoint it, or near that area. Um, I would say possibly 4 to 5 light years away from Earth, but that's just a guess.
Can you tell us how long they've been on planet Earth?
Um, Pamela's been here since 1835.
Well, the presence of the tall whites, like their facility. So there's like different like S4, S5. Do you remember which group, what the number was for where they were located?
They were, if you go up towards Indian Springs, where Creech Air Force Base is, uh, they're up in that area there down. I don't want to be very specific because it gives people ideas, and they want to try to walk into that area. Um, but they're from around the Creech Air Force. I know exactly where they're at, but I want to just kind of say they're around the Creech Air Force Base. And I did know Wilbur Creech when he was a lieutenant uh, uh, colonel, and he did make general, and they did name that base after him, but he's deceased now.
Does that look does that look about accurate there? Somewhere in this area?
James, it's a little bit kind of washed out there on my end.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on. So, can you tell us? So, how did you actually interact with this Oscar Schneider? When did you first meet him?
Well, when I was first taking on the spacecraft in 1959, there was a man in a German SS uniform, and he never spoke to me. Uh, and the little grays examined me along with some humanoid uh, uh, entities. Now, 4 months after, I think it was around 4 or 5 months after my encounter, the same group of aliens uh, is they went out and abducted Betty and Barney Hill. That was the same group, and Barney saw Oscar Schneider because he gave the testimony in his tapes when his psychiatrist examined him, put him up on diagnosis, that he talked of a German SS officer inside the spacecraft. So that was Oscar. Oscar just rode around with the little grays as an observer. Now, I have also rode around with the little grays. That was part of my training um, to make sure that they abided by their quota.
Okay, so were you on the same craft with Oscar Schneider and Betty and Barney Hill?
Yes, but not at the same time as Betty and Barney Hill. Theirs happened about 4 to 5 months after my encounter.
So you've never interacted with those two?
Not with Betty and Barney Hill, no.
Yeah, and in the secret, say the tapes, the audio recordings that was never released publicly. I guess I'm going to put it out there because at this point, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Well, I mean, maybe it matters to somebody, but I don't think there's live anymore. He had a venereal disease, so he was saying that he was abducted by aliens, but he got a venereal disease. So, I think there might have been Germans involved. It's like an early um, experiment with the Germans as well. But go ahead and continue on.
Well, first of all, if he had venereal disease, the Germans didn't give it to him, nor did the little grays give it to him. That just because he had something doesn't mean he picked it up there.
Okay. All right. So, so what happens? So you're interacting. Okay. So you're on this craft. Can you describe what this craft actually looks like that you're with Oscar Schneider?
It was a spear. It would look if you on the outside of the spear, it looked to be about 30 feet high and 30 feet wide. But once the hatch opened up and you walked in it, it might have been as big. It was maybe 90 feet high, 90 feet deep. If on the inside, so it was sort of an optical illusion. It was much larger on the inside than the outside, and it did not have any landing gear. It just hovered above the ground, about 3 to 4 feet above the ground.
And did we build this, or was it stolen tech or borrowed tech from
No,
you?
we didn't. We did not build this.
Hmm. All right. It was. Do you know who built it?
Yes, it was the same humanoid that that first took me on was the one that built it. I call them Atlanteans, and because if you go out off the coast of Peru, out into the very deep part of the ocean, there used to be an island out there that sunk a little over 10,000 years ago. Uh, that is
Are you talking
Atlant.
about Lemuria?
I'm talking about Atlantis.
Well, I thought Atlantis was in the Atlantic Ocean off the
No,
coast of Peru is in the
no,
Pacific.
no. Atlantis is about it's off the coast of Peru, about 1,500 miles.
Okay. Um. So would there's a group of people that are known as the custodians, and they've been, I believe, been implicated in some of these great resets, like with Tartaria. Do you think these are the same beings? This Atlantean group. It's a breakaway group that doesn't want humanity to become intergalactic.
James, what little I know is that you have a three-fingered Atlantean and you have a six-finger Atlantean, and and the two different entities don't like one another at all. Uh, if you go to Easter Island and look at the statues on Easter Island, uh, they look just like that. They look like they're white Caucasians, but their arms and legs has weathered up. They have lost the use of their arms and their legs, uh, and they have to have put on a anti-gravity belt where they can float, or either they would crawl on the floor like a baby. They
So
probably
so the so all those sculptures are based on a real entity, a being that look
yes,
like that.
yes. There's a reason
Try
why
to
those
look this up.
statues are buried where the arms and the legs
Yes.
are not showing.
And of course it's gonna do that. Okay, so we got the yeah. Okay. So these beings are out of what you say, Atlantis or maybe Lemuria or whatever that
They
place.
to, it's an island that um, sank. We had what happened. A uh, The polar cap got hit with a beam of light, and the Earth shifted, and and the island flooded. It was flooded, and the sea rose up. The sea used to be much lower than what it is now, and that island is is not very far from those statues.
Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on here. So we can get through this tonight. But tell us what happens next. So you're on this craft interacting with Oscar. How did you actually, or what's the next important thing for us to know in this story?
Well, you know, uh, I was recruited. Um, President Eisenhower met with my parents, and he was he was in the very last leg of his presidency, and he said, "Look, we need to learn all we can about this astronaut, and we need your son to to help us." And my father, being a very loyal patriot, he had served the army during World War II. He said, "Yes, well, my son will definitely do his part." So uh, I was taken to Area 51, and I was practically raised out there. Um, and so I learned a lot. I have flown craft for the Little Grays. I have flown shuttlecraft for the Tall Whites. I've also commanded the Nostromo. Uh, like I was telling you about the alien that had the acid for blood. Um, I've done all of that, but what I'm not very well known for is Camp Hero, the time travel and experiments, and that's what I'm more or less talking about tonight. The Eldridge is going to be making a return trip. Now, it's like if you take a rock and you throw it into a pond, it makes a wave. Okay. Um, so what I'm saying is that the every 20 years, the signal comes back to Montauk. And every 20 years, the signal, you can, if you lock on to the signal, you have a chance to get back onto the Eldridge. And the last time I was on the Eldridge, I had a firefight on there because I had an entity that that got out of a spear with me, and I was firing a weapon, and I blew the mask off, and it landed down by the fence of Montauk. I believe that if you watch the movie, The Philadelphia Experiment, you'll see the ship mast coming down by the electrified fence. That did happen, people, and I'm not some kook that's gotten on the air tonight with you. I am barcoded. If I take my arm and go back to Area 51, they can put it under a scanner and they can see my barcode. I'm also been fingerprinted, and they also have my DNA on file at Nellis Air Force Base, or should I say Creech Air Force Base. And if that's not enough, well then they can get a hold of the tall whites, and the tall whites can verify who I am. But I need to
Can,
get back. I
can
need to
you
get.
can you comment? Did you know David Adair, who was a young man at Area 51? I think he was working on a specific type of propulsion technology that was way faster than typical jet engines.
I knew of him. I've met him before, but I'm not that close to him. But I have met him when he was younger. Um, when he was still in high school, as soon as he got out of high school, they drafted him. But he's a real funny guy. I mean, he's likable. Now,
Yeah,
I
he li-
studied.
he lives in Salisbury, which is right near me, so North Carolina. Yeah.
I didn't know where he lived at. Um, I studied under. I'm trying to think that a man's name now. Uh, I studied a little bit of rocketry before as well.
Okay. Well, let's move on here. So let's see here. We got different comments about tall whites. People are asking about the gray skin. Are they like hybrids of gray and humanoid? Do you know if they're hybrids?
I'm reading the question now.
Uh,
Tall Watt.
long hair.
I'm reading a question right now on your screen. Tall whites really give high, great value to their beautiful long hair. Most of them have long hair. True. Um, their hair is more transparent, but it is kind of like a platinum blonde.
Okay. Okay. Um, Nordic. Are they connected to Nordics?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go on here. So, uh, where do you want to take this next?
Well, see, I want to bring it back to the Eldridge here. Uh, James, this signal only comes around every 20 years. I so this is the problem. Um, I want to get back on the ship, and I want to dislodge this spear that's in the starboard side of the ship. And the spear is very, very advanced. Uh, we just don't have anything like it. And I want to take that spear and bring it back out to Nellis and turn it over to um, the Department of Foreign Technology Transfer. This spear needs to be studied. And And the problem is, if I pull the spear out of the starboard side of the ship is going to sink in the water because that's the gravity, anti-gravity device is holding the water back. But if I take the ship and I ram the ship up onto the shoreline, then pull the try to unwedge the craft, I can fly this craft to Area 51 to be studied. But the problem is that we have some men on that ship that is going to need some medical attention. I'm talking about I need doctor beds, I need plasma, I need a medical team because these guys, once I disengage and remove this spear, they're going to be covered in frost. Okay, and they're going to need a lot of heat. They're going to need, like I said, plasma, and we're probably going to end up having to put them in ICU for a while. So this is not going to be something small, and 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 the public. I don't, maybe they can be hid somewhere or put on an island or whatever. But we definitely got a
Shit.
problem here.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just back up a little bit because if you look at this research on, like I wouldn't really consider Wikipedia that great of a resource here, but according to Wikipedia, we're looking at the Philadelphia experiment. Now there was multiple actual experiments. The first one being in Philadelphia, near Philadelphia shipyard, but this one is one of these later experiments apparently. So we're looking at like the 1940s, but you said 1962. So can you explain? Is that the point of time that you started at? Did you actually go back in time, or are you outside of time?
I can hyper thread through time. I can go in at any point that I want. Okay. If I start my mission off in 2003, I can go back to 1943. Or if I can start off in 1962, I can go to 1943. It doesn't matter what year it is. I can go back to that 1943 experiment.
All right. So what year did you go back to? What year was it? Do you know?
1943.
Okay. And when you say this sphere, is that what the craft that you're on, or is this something else that's creating this bubble? Or is it
It's the actual spear that I got abducted on, or my first encounter on, is the one that has slammed into the side of this Eldridge. Now, they did go back and put some men on board, and they took an axe and busted up a bunch of the tubes uh, that help run the coils to the that didn't stop it. Okay, it's got an external source of power, which is this spear, and it has to be dislodged from it to disengage the teleportation experiment.
all right? So, this vessel, it went. So they're trying to create physical invisibility by shifting the craft. I'm sorry, the vessel outside of time to just a point where it's in what's known as hyperspace. So the occupants, the officers on this vessel are going to be are cold, and for what reason? In
Well,
hyperspace.
when I was on it, it didn't feel that cold. It just was a slight coolness. Now, when I came off of it, I was covered in maybe about a half inch of just ice all over my skin. My lips were blue. I thought I had been on it maybe 30 minutes, but it turned out to be 4 days, 4 or 5 days. And I was suffering from hypothermia, and I was very, very weak. I had to be given plasma. I had to be had to have a tube put in my throat to feed me. There's no sense of time on this craft at all.
Okay. So, quick question. So your sphere that you were on showed up, went back in time, and how did you get off the sphere onto the craft when it wedged into it? Did you teleport on, or?
What happened was I flew the spear next to the warship, and I was able to communicate through the computer to the radio onto the ship. And they said, stand by for an experiment. All right. And the next thing I know, when they cut on the generators, it destabilized the spear. I started getting some very hard zigzagging back and forth. Uh, and the next thing I knew, I had slammed in just slightly below the water line on the starboard side of the ship. And I was able to open the hatch, and I had an entity that I had been fighting with that that exited the spear. And so I took one of the pulse rifles that was in the spear and went out the hatch trying to hunt this entity down. I was able to corner it and lock it into the cargo hull. And but what happened was I did a lot of damage to the ship, firing this this weapon. I was blowing off hunks of steel the size of a small vehicle, and I also blew the mask off where the copper coral was on top of the antenna there. Excuse me, the ship mask. I mean, that came down next to the fence. But I ended up getting off. um, the first time uh, I jumped off, I've been on it a couple of times. The last time that I was on it, uh, I simply walked through the wall, and I moved forward in time about 800 years. And they had they had never seen spam before. I had um, a sack with me. I had taken some spam, and that was all the food that I could gather up. And I went so far in the future, they had never seen food in a can. They knew about it because they had museums, but they didn't eat any kind of food out of a can. They had never seen anything like it. I went that
Were
far in the
were they
future.
still eating meat in that future timeline?
No, no, they had a pink paste that they ate, and these were Caucasian men. They were military, and they were going to somewhere out in space. They wanted me to go with them, and I just told them, I said, "Well, you know, I'm just 11 years old. I need to grow up first." And they said, "It's okay. We understand." And they teleported me back to my home. But, I did go back to Nellis Air Force Base and worked many more years after that. So it's not like it was, it happened and that was the end of it.
So they have these tubes on site inside the vessel.
Yes.
And so
Now,
you
I did not break those tubes. There were two guys that went before me that attempted it, and it did not stop the Eldridge. Now, in 1983, they went down to Camp Hero and brought some electronic stuff down there and fired up the old antenna. Um, and That's when they saw the ship teleport. I believe that was the reason why they made that movie, was based off of what they saw on the computer monitor in the control room.
okay. All right. So of course you've already gone into this in a previous show. So let's go into so you're in the future. Eventually they send you back in time, and what happens next?
Well, that's a good question. The Getting back to the signal here that's going to be coming back. It's going to be coming back around about August of 2003, and we have to make a decision here. Are we going to let this opportunity pass by, or is somebody going to try to jump the ship? And I'd like to be the one to jump the ship. I know Lieutenant Alexander Cameron, he's the commander of the ship. And you can't shut the ship down, but because the propulsion system is run manually, I believe I can, steer this ship into the shoreline and try to dislodge this alien craft. And if I can do that, then I can fly it to Nellis where it can be studied. It has to be studied. And that's the prize of it, is this alien craft. It's very advanced. There's nothing like it that's in the inventory. This craft can outfly any type of spacecraft that is at Area 51. It's very fast.
Oh, okay. Um,
And it has time travel capabilities.
all right. So, well, let's discuss a little bit more about that. Okay. So that's that sphere that you had back in the 1960s and you lost. That's what you're trying to that's what you're trying to recover mostly. More interesting.
Well, it actually happened sometime around, um, I would say around 1968 or 69, when that event occurred. When I got out of the craft, I left the computer on when I opened the hatch to follow this entity out. And as long as that computer is running, that's what's powering the Eldridge. Uh,
Can
I
you
need,
just can you describe the when you were walking on the Eldridge? You said there was light coming from the ground and the floor, and people that would step. Was it step through the light or step on the? I guess you stepped on the dark spots, but if you stepped into light, you would. Some of the crew members merge with the whole.
yes.
Is that? So can you describe what you saw?
Well, there's if you go onto the deck, it's there's areas of the deck where you see green light. It's like if you got a chemical stick, like you take and you shake it and you break it and you hold it up, you see the green glow. Uh, there's areas of the ship where you see a green glow, and there's other areas that's in the shadow is just pitch black. It's pitch black. And part of the ship has been on fire. I put a fire out, um, and it burned. The fire burnt like the gelatin fire that, like, you go to the grocery store and you get these little cans of petroleum fuel that's got jelly in it. It burned similar to that, but it burnt kind of green. So there's been a fire on the Eldridge that I put out, Um, but if you step in the wrong place, you will sink into the steel. That's the dangerous part. And because I vibrate, um, time travel is vibrations. Okay, it's like you vibrate at the same speed that everything else vibrates. All right, and that is how I'm trying to explain it tonight.
Okay, so why did the USS Eldridge return every 20 years, beginning in 1943, then 63, then 83, and so on and so on?
It's the way the computer is set up. It could be the alien computer. It's kind of like, okay, you have a cookie on your computer, and uh and you delete it, but you go on a while, then you get another pop up. Okay, that's what's happening here with uh with the Eldritch. It's possibly there's is something in the alien computer that's doing it, and so that's why I want to get back to Nellis or either to Creech. I need to get some help either from the tall whites or either the little grays or anyone who would be willing to assist me in that, because if I was dislodged this spear, it would need to be studied. Okay, and it needs to be turned over to the Office of Foreign Technology Transfer and let those individuals figure out why the signal returns every 20 years. Let them determine it.
So, Jimmy, back in 1983, Adam Montauk, Bill and Hillary Clinton were out there along with the military watching the return of the Eldridge. Surely they must have known back then that this sphere technology was embedded into the hull. Why didn't they try to do a rescue mission back then?
Well, they did try to do a rescue mission, but you have to remember when you have an alien spear in it, there's no one understands it. Now, what I did find out when I was on that craft, I got to look at the computer, and the computer is sitting next to the flight chair that I got into. Um, when I first got into the flight chair, there was a beam of light coming up from uh, the control handle, and I put my hand into the beam of light. Now, when you open up your car window, you're going down the road, and you open your car window up, and you stick your hand out, and you can feel your hand flow. You can feel a little bit of pressure on your hand from the wind. That's what it felt like on my hand. And also, if I tilt my hand to the right, the craft will go to the right. Tilt my hand to the left, the craft will go to the left. So it's basically like a joystick, but it's putting your hand at the light to fly it. Okay. Now I can't. I'm going to explain something here. The monitor that was sitting in front of the flight chair, um, the writing on it I could not read. It was alien writing. But what happened was a beam of light came out of the monitor and it struck me in the face, and it knocked me out. Okay, and but when I came to, the knowledge to fly it was embedded in me. It's like you're using if you take a flashlight and shine it into your eye, it's like a teaching tool. Okay, it taught me how to fly it. Um, but when I came to, I could fly this craft, and I could also fly it through time much faster than anything I've ever seen. Now the computer was translucent. You could kind of see partially through the computer, and the circuit board is very different. Now, when you open your computer up, you see flat, square microchips, okay? Well, in this computer, it not only had square microchips, it had octagon, pentagon, it had round spheres, it had triangular chips, pyramid chips, okay? Other words, it was all different type of geographical, uh, geometrical shaped chips. It just wasn't a square flat chip, okay? They could be long and have 5 sides to it. It could have 6 sides to it. It was all different shaped chips that power this thing up. I've never seen anything like that. So not only is propulsion systems very advanced, the computer is like nothing I've ever seen. And I've seen computers at Area 51, and this is nothing I've ever seen before.
Did they use crystals in their computers?
Yes.
Okay, and do you think they were able to successfully backward engineer this crystal type technology and to enhance their own computer technology?
Who is they?
Oh, okay. The skunk works over at Area 51.
We don't have anything like that. Nothing that I've seen at Area 51 even comes close to it. That's why I wanted to get the tall whites or either the grays to look at it, because it's built like nothing. I've been in their craft, and this is nothing like I've ever seen before.
Do you have any information on the actual crystals? Like, where I'm assuming they were grown for its purpose. Do you have any information on the manufacturing process?
James, it looked like it was molded all together. There's no screws holding the the plates in there. It's translucent, like you can see through the metal, okay? You can see structure to the computer, but it's like you can the computer's got this greenish glow to it, translucent glow to it. And and so I do know, instead of having a keyboard, it just shoots a beam of light into your face. Now, when I woke up, I had blood coming out of my ear and a little bit out of my nose. So apparently it swelled my brain there. But when I came to, um, I could fly it. You know, I know it's kind of hard for you to comprehend, but it's like knowledge being learned by light. Instead of reading a book, this knowledge is beaming to your eyes.
All right. Okay. Did you encounter Al Balak while you were on the USS Eldridge?
I have worked with Al before, on several missions. Um, I never saw Al directly on the deck of the Eldridge, but I know I've seen Al not Area 51. I've seen Al at Camp Hero before. I've actually been to Neptune with Al. If you watch the movie Abyss, you see the alien that's in the ocean. That was that basically that entity is really from Neptune. It's a real beautiful entity.
So that movie that's real. That's not like some. It's supposed to be like a science fiction.
Well, I'm talking of the alien itself is what it looks like. The ones on Neptune.
So on Neptune, I mean it's got to be really cold. How is there any water on the planet that's not frozen?
James, I can only tell you that we had some anti-gravity belts and we went there. Um, and we weren't there long. But Al was in charge of all that.
Hmm.
Okay. You have to remember that there's an age difference between me and Al, and this is back when Al was in relatively good shape. Uh, he worked for the Navy because he had a Navy uniform on when he did that.
Well, can you tell us more about the colony on Neptune? Was it I mean,
All I know is that they look very much like if you watch the movie The Abyss, that type of alien. Very that is the very best closest that I've been able to
oh,
describe them.
okay, but Jimmy, did humans have colonies built or an outpost built on Neptune where they actually travel there first and then to the
I,
ocean?
I I didn't say anything about an ocean. I said they look like the
Oh, okay,
ones
okay.
from that movie. I'm
I'm
just
fine. Okay.
talking about the alien itself. But I don't know about an outpost on Neptune. I just know I went there with Al and about 4 or 5 other people, and they have some problems on Neptune. Apparently, these entities they have their own little squabbles, and we went there to assist them for about a Earth day or one of their days on Neptune.
Oh, okay. Well, going back to Al Bielek, so when he was on the ship, I mean, he said he time traveled to the future, somewhere I guess about what 400 years, 200 years in the future, and he said that planet Earth went through a depopulation around 1999, and then I don't know if he said there was a series of civil war or wars, nuclear wars, but eventually the population just totally dropped off, and then the society rebuilt itself, and he was going into the library, I guess holographic libraries, to look into that history of time, but the records are not really clear. So if he was going into the future at that point, then maybe you were going into the same timeline that he was on. What do you think of that?
Well, I have been to the library with uh, Lieutenant Alexander Cameron from the Eldridge.
And what
Uh,
year, wait, what year did you go to this library?
well, we went in, I know he went in 63. Um, he did come back. There was some admiral that died back in the 90s, and he just showed up out of nowhere. Um, and he attended some admiral who had died. And this is when I want to say uh, this is um, back in the 90s, like 92, 90, 93, 4, somewhere up in that area there.
Okay. All right. So they
Jo-
were.
John McCain, uh, I do remember John McCain was at the funeral, but I didn't go to the funeral. I just know of that he wanted to talk to John McCain, but he never did.
I'm sorry. Who wanted to talk to John McCain? Oh,
Uh,
Al Bielek.
no, Lieutenant Alexander Cameron
Okay.
from the Eldridge, and he went to the funeral of this airman that died, and he was wanting to talk to Senator John McCain to explain the experiment, but he never did talk from what I understood of it.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay, so you said that every 20 years the craft would reappear, and then they would send off a team to go to the surface over, I guess, near Oyster Bay in Long Island, to go to a public library, pull some newspapers.
yes.
Okay, so they did that in 63.
Every time that they come ashore, they do it. They want to know what's happened. It's like they're doing an experiment, and like you have radio communications blackout, and it's see, there's this thing about no, he doesn't realize how many years have gone by. His when Lieutenant Alexander Cameron looks at his watch, it could, what may be 5 minutes for us could be 50. I mean, what could be 5 minutes to him could be 50 years to us. Okay. All right. The few seconds of a watch could be several years. So there's no perception of time on that ship.
Hmm.
That's what makes it so dangerous.
Well, okay, so while their crewmates are freezing, they're getting frozen, they're sending teams out. So they aware they're
No, they're not. They're not frozen now. I'm saying as long as the generators are running, everything is normal. You know,
okay.
if
Okay.
if if you dislodge this stuff, you cut this power system off, then you're going to have some real major problems. That's why I said I needed some technical assistance from Area 51
Okay.
and the
So,
hospital beds.
all right. So when I guess in 1983, you were over there in Long Island when it reappeared with
Yes.
Hillary Clinton. What was their reaction when they were seeing it on the screen?
Well, Bill and Hillary was inside uh, the control room, and now I did not bring them in there. They were just brought in there by management, and they explained to Bill what was going on, and then they told Bill that he would be the future president of the United States. And Hillary, her mouth, I mean, her eyes got real big, and so the Clintons know about the time traveling experiments. Now, what has since happened is a lot of these elected officials now, um, they know who's going to win the elections. So um, when you go to vote, you're just wasting your time. Your presidents are picked for you now, okay? And so we lost some freedom there, and I'm not responsible for that. I
But
believe
but
I
still,
believe what happens at Camp Hero stays at Camp Hero, and what happens at Area 51 stays at Area 51. We need to keep these politicians uh, from from you know from knowing their fate.
but Jimmy, through Montauk or whatever, however you did it, when you went into the future, every time you go to the future, there was nuclear war. But they were doing things in Montauk to change that, so the timeline kept changing. So that means our future isn't set in stone. We can change it, like
We
politicians can possibly.
we can change it, but we're going to need some help because we have, like I said, a little pop up on the computer. We got a little malware in the computer here. Okay. Um, we need some, we need some, we need a high, we need some text down here that can get into this and get it out. And like I said, is probably coming from this alien sphere, and that's why we're going to need something a little better than the average technician here, because the way the computer is made, the computer is not from Earth that is running on the Eldridge right now.
Okay. So, but Alabalik says the Eldridge eventually keeps going further and further into the future. So that means we're not successful, or can that be changed?
It can be changed, but it has to be done during. It would need to be done during this 2003 when the signal is closest to coming back, when the signal bounces back. Okay. Now, the reason they keep getting wrong on the dates and everything, when you time jump, your brain swells a little. Okay. And if you watch the movie Army of the 12 Monkeys, where Bruce Willis plays this actor, John Cole here, Mr. Cole can't get his dates right, because he's a little bit off on everything. So humans can time travel, but it kind of makes your mind a little bit like Swiss cheese here. It takes a while for the swelling to go down and for you to realize, what date it is. So when you hear these time travelers talking about, well, there's going to be a war at such and such date, it doesn't happen. It doesn't mean that he was wrong. It just means that he's having a little difficulty remembering because of the swelling in his brain. I'm reading a message here.
Or,
What is
or
the health effect on
on
the
the
body
body?
during time travel? Uh, it's real rough. We can do it, but if you do it too often, you'll get a little bit confused because of the swelling. Um, Now, that's probably because the equipment at Montauk was already outdated before, it was barely built. Okay. You have to remember those were glass tubes that's powering this thing up. So, if you took a generator, say you have a generator in your backyard and you have a drop cord light, and you put a fluorescent bulb, screw in a fluorescent bulb into that drop cord, and you cut that generator on, you see that fluorescent bulb flicker. So it's what you call, that's kind of like unclean electricity. It's not real. It's not real smooth. It's not real stable. And if you go back and you listen to Duncan Cameron's interpretation of it, uh, he freaks out when you see the lights flicker. If you watch the movie Stranger Things, uh, you see them looking at the lights flickering. So the flickering of the fluorescent lights is kind of a bad thing, because a lot of those Montauk boys that did the time jumps were lost in time. Quite a few didn't come back.
So we were just, yeah, well, they may not necessarily be dead. There's probably other alternate realities, hopefully, I like to think. But um, then we were discussing a little bit earlier in private about Brookhaven Labs and being able to make a claim in case you said something about cancer related to time travel. Is there a connection between the two?
Yes, Brookhaven Laboratories is where the heavy iron collider is now. Now that's about 60 miles from Camp Hero. Now, when Camp Hero closed in 1980, um, the base itself was taken over by a private company, um, and Preston Nichols who used to work at Camp Hero got a job with a company called Diamond Defense Electronics. And Diamond Defense Electronics went from Brookhaven. They ran power lines from Brookhaven down to Camp Hero, and they wired up the antenna dish. So when the 1983 experiments occurred, Montauk, well, Camp Hero had been closed down for 3 years. But what was powering up the antenna was the power coming from the super collider. Okay, now if you go that super collider, there's a lot of radiation around there. Um, there's all kind of chemicals on that place, and like I said, if you time jump, and this is to anyone who's walking around saying, well, look, I've time traveled and but their dates are a little bit off. Well, that's because your brain's been swelling. So I'm getting ready next week. I'm going to put a claim in, um, not for Brookhaven, but I'm going to put a claim in out at Nellis Air Force Base because I was exposed to some of the nuclear testing out there when I was a kid. The last 7 bombs that detonated above ground, I was out at Nellis, out at the test range when those bombs went off. So I'm going to be filing on that. Now, Brookhaven, getting back to Brookhaven, if you get around that radar equipment, that can cause you to get sick. You have radiation waves. It's like sticking your head inside of a microwave, James. You're going to have some swelling. Uh, if you take an egg and you put it in a microwave and you cut that microwave on, that egg will pop. That's a pressure that you have on your brain swelling up. So it can cause some issues there.
Okay. Well, so we went into the yeah. So what about in 2003? Was there a mission to try to rescue the Eldridge and this and salvage the sphere ship?
James, that's the question that I can't answer because in 2003, no one approached me for it. Now, I had just retired in 2003, and when I did work at out of Area 51, I did it in my spare time. Okay. So the last year or two, 2001 on up, I worked a lot of overtime at my job, so I never did get to go out to Nellis out there because I had to get my time in so I could retire. But now that I'm retired, I have plenty of time on my hands to devote to go back and try to unravel some of this mess that occurred at Camp Hero. And I want to say this, we're just not ready for time travel because, like I said, instead of we stopping these wars and it's one war after another war. And now it's gotten to the point, where we're bickering over who's supposed to be the legal president. You got people wearing dresses and all this woke agenda, this transgender agenda, and I feel that we've wasted an opportunity. So that's why these entities, these aliens, are sitting back. We've become part of the experiment.
Well, I have a source, and I'm hoping this person is willing to come forward and share more information. But this person worked at the UN, and they were informed that there is they had access to time travel tech. They have reports of the future, and there's a nuclear war. And so the elites are already preparing for it, but they were more specifically told that it's a negative AI, probably from the future, that was sent back in time, that's manipulating humanity to do this, because they want another reset so that this AI can get hold of all the resources of planet Earth, because we're basically in the way.
James, I worked with John Titor. Now, John Titor, if you watch the movie Terminator, the very first one, we took, when I was at Camp Hero, I had to go help John get an ICBM 5100 computer. Now, John is from the timeline 2036, and I went with him there. But before I went, what made me want to go there was this. I went into a grocery store with him, and he started crying. And what had happened was he saw that there was food in the grocery store. He saw produce piled up. He saw cans of food, and he broke down. And he started weeping, just uncontrollably weeping, in my arm. And I looked, and Montauk boys are mentally, they're very tough. Okay, we're picked not to break down, not to show emotion. It's a can-do attitude. If something doesn't work, we make it work. All right, but what has happened here? When I did jump and go for it with him, I went down to Florida, and there's no power anywhere. There's a lot of oil in the Gulf of Mexico. What has happened here? There's been a nuclear exchange, and it is so bad that there's groups of cannibalistic people that are running around, and they will kill you and cut you up just to have something to eat. And there's 5 super states. The United States is no more. There is
Yeah,
a United America.
This is a map. This was Alexander, who was in the same Temple Recon division as Titer, but he drew this map, and then I he just sketched out.
Well, it's a little off, but I would say it was 5 super states, and they don't call themselves the United States of America. They say United Americas, plural, United Americas. There's no border here. There's no Canada. There's no Mexico. There's just these 5 super states.
And each one is named after a farmer general who defeated the New World Order.
No, what there is where there's libraries see, when everything gets knocked down, the libraries, they go back in the libraries. That's their only knowledge base. There's no computers. There's no electricity. You get up at sunrise and you work to sundown. That's 7 days a week, okay? And if you break a leg, yeah, they can set your leg, but as far as anything else, they can't operate on you. You just die, okay? There's no aspirins. There's nothing. It's very primitive, and people are very, very religious, but people are also very, very mad that this has happened, because it puts a great, it's getting knocked down. You have no heat, you have no electricity, you live very primitive.
Yeah, well, but in all intents and purposes, there's multiple parallel realities, and maybe we can go to a reality where we don't have to manifest this.
That's why I want to get back on the Eldridge here, is that if I can get back on it and unstick this craft, then I can bring in some high tech people from Area 51 and tell them what's going on. But when I was with Camp Hero, I had no idea that they were doing this. Okay, I believed in the program, but now that I see how it's been sold out and that only a few people benefited, this is supposed to have benefited humanity,
You
and
mean
it's
that?
been,
You mean time travel technology?
yes, but instead of benefiting the whole, it's only benefited of the few
Right, because
select.
they would go back in time and purchase properties to ensure their family's dynasties were became extremely wealthy.
Exactly. I've been in the Back to the Future car, and what they would do, you could go forward. It'd take about an hour to go 1 year forward. But what they would do, they would go like 24 hours in the future. They would get a newspaper and they'd come back 24 hours back. They would know what the stock market was doing. And then they would buy the stocks they knew would rise up. So they're using the time travel to see what the stock market is going to do and enrich themselves.
But and all, also we should mention that this timeline is a variant that's not supposed to exist
Correct.
because the
They,
South won the Civil War. That's is that the organic timeline?
you buddy believe it. They went back and they tampered with the Civil War. And when they did that, it altered our time. So our time is been tampered with. And when they did that, we all became part of the experiment. That's why these aliens won't talk to us. We're part of the experiment now. And I believe it's like an aptitude test, an intelligence test. If we can figure this out and go back to them and say, well, look, we know our time has been altered here and we want to change it back. And that might be the, once they see that type of intelligence, then they know, they say, okay, well, he can't be tricked. Uh, the Nelson Mandela effect here, okay? Uh, that's what's going on.
So when the South won the Civil War, they moved the capital from Washington to Richmond, and then the United States went through a very slow technological um, innovation revolution. It wasn't
Well,
even a revolution, really.
what they did, what really happened, Abraham Lincoln was bisexual, and I was at Camp Hero when they wrote out the Gettysburg Address, and they would send uh, some of the boys through with the address, and I never met Abraham Lincoln. I do know that I met John Wilkes Booth. I assisted John Wilkes Booth uh, and brought him the medicine once he broke his foot when he jumped off the stage. I was at Ford's Theater when uh, he shot Lincoln in the back of the ear, back of the head,
Well, why would you want to help John Wilkes Booth?
because John Wilkes, as I said, time has been tampered with. Okay, uh, President Lincoln was bisexual. He would sleep in the same bed with his security guard. That's why Mary Lincoln called uh, Abraham Lincoln and the security guard in bed, and she had a nervous breakdown. Okay, uh, if you were to dig up John Wilkes Booth's body and take a DNA test, you would find out it's not John Wilkes there. Um,
Yeah,
I,
because he escaped to England.
yes,
What about the rest of his life?
when I was with him, when we were riding out of Washington, a Union soldier came up on us, and John pulled his pistol out and shot and killed him. And we threw his body on the back of the horse, and we went to Dr. Mudd's office, his home, and Dr. Mudd, reset John's ankle that he had broke. And I had, like I said, I had brought some painkillers with me from Camp Hero to give to John. And so the body that was found in the barn when the federal threw the lantern in, John was firing with his pistol, and what I did, I kicked out the back board out of the back of the barn, but we left. We had put the body of that Union soldier in there, and what happened was me and John escaped, but the soldier that was left in there had red hair. That was the soldier we had killed a few miles out from Dr. Mudd's office. So the only thing they got to do is do a DNA test on those remains, and they'll see it's not John Wilkes Booth.
Right.
John Wilkes Booth did not have red hair.
Oh, okay.
That skeleton will have red hair.
Well, wasn't John Wilkes Booth a Rothschild agent? He was being paid by the banks to kill him.
I don't know. I just know that I met John Wilkes Booth and I met his brother. He was already at the Ford's Theater. I went to Ford's Theater and assisted him, like raising the curtain up, stuff like that. But I was mostly there as a monitor, as an observer, on up to the point where they started tinkering with the time. And
so so why if Montauk wanted the North to win the Civil War, why would they allow Lincoln to be killed? Why did they try to protect him? Wouldn't the Union be better to have a alive Lincoln president?
No, you have to remember there's fractions within Camp Hero that worked against one another. There was some in Camp Hero that did not want to tinker with time. They wanted to use time to learn, what was going on. I was in that group. All I wanted to do was to learn history, to see what, like if something went wrong, to try to correct it. But there was other people that were at Camp Hero that wanted to change it to benefit themselves. So you have that crowd.
Yeah, but going back to answering the question, if Lincoln was not assassinated, what would the country be like? Would it have been negative?
It would have been more negative than it is now. He never should. Like I said, the Gettysburg Address was wrote at Camp Hero. All of it was staged. What went on then in 1865 is what's going on right now. It's a false election.
So you're saying Lincoln cheated? He was never not really the president?
All I know is that he was bisexual. I know that because there was other Montauk boys that slept with him.
Jimmy, about 3 years ago, well, probably a little bit more than that. I was in contact with one of my handlers at Montauk, and he told me that they would send me back in time to service Lincoln, and I just didn't want to believe it because I thought, well, I didn't want to think Lincoln was a bad person like that. But it's really interesting that you're saying this because I guess that's confirmation, something that I'm not ready to deal with. But maybe we should move on.
Well, James, first of all, had you been there, I would have known that, and I did not see you during that time period.
But there would have been even other groups, maybe through Brookhaven, because we're still trying to figure that out. Which group?
Well, if it did happen, it was right. It was done behind my back. Now, I during the time that this was going on, um, I knew all the boys at Camp Hero. Okay, and you were not in that group. Now, I don't know what the man told you. Maybe he knows something that I don't know, but I do know this. I never saw you doing any time jumps towards Lincoln. Um, I
Yeah,
just like I said, I don't know why he told you
yeah,
that.
yeah. Okay, well, we can discuss more about it later in private, but let's so yeah, so in the when the South in the timeline where the South won the Civil War, the technology and the current era is similar to the 1940s, like those type of radios. That's the era
Well,
technology.
where it's
That's
more
where we
like
are at.
if things had been left alone. Remember back around about 1960. Well, you wouldn't remember, but it'd be like 1965, 1970 now. We would still have rotary dial phones. We wouldn't have, well, the internet would still be experimental. Uh, we would be living, but we'd be living slightly. We go at a slightly slower pace. We all end up in the end catching up. It's just this timeline is accelerated.
So, in the timeline where the South won the Civil War, uh, did they avoid the nuclear war too? Timeline in the end, they just
There,
accelerated.
there's wars, but instead of going to Vietnam, we go to war down in South America, and it's mostly conventional stuff. It's like having the military of 1965, 1970. They had nuclear weapons in 1965, 1970, but it's conventional. Okay, we're arguing. We're down in South America fighting down there. We're not over in Vietnam.
Did you ever go into the future version of when the South won the Civil War, like in the
Yes,
present? Okay, whatever happened to Washington D.C.? What did they do with it?
it everything. Well, everything's down in Virginia, but um, right now you would down in Texas, they'll be arguing about wanting to go to war with, let's say, Brazil. Okay. Um, there'll be in the newspapers, Brazil did this, Brazil did that. Okay. That's the timeline that be going on right now.
And did they ever get rid of slavery?
Yes. Uh, let me explain something. We see illegal immigrants coming across our border right now that we can't do anything about. Well, back during the Civil War, the same thing was happening, except the North had these slave ships. They would drop them off on the East Coast, okay, because they wanted cheap labor. All right, and back then, uh, the what the North did, they had all the machinery to make the cotton into cloth, but they had it up north. And what they did, they sent the slaves down south to do the picking. Okay, there's no machinery to make cotton into cloth in the south. Okay, so they did. What happened was they the South banned slavery, and it just died out.
Do you know what year they banned slavery?
It would have been about a year later than other
Yeah.
words. They also tinkered with the battlefield. giving uh, President Jackson, um, uh, 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 well, what they did, they gave the plans, the battle plans to the Union generals. Okay. It was stacked against the South to begin with. Um, uh, President Andrew Jackson had the plans of Robert E. Lee because Montauk brought him those battle plans.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He was not
Um,
supposed to win the war. South won that war.
so slavery was already on the way out because modern technology was making it really that type of plantation farm obsolete.
It was already on its way out. But I want to say this: it goes back. If you can't, just like you can't control your borders now, they couldn't control the borders back then. And so these different foreigners would come in and dump these slaves out. And that what the South did was they fed them and gave them shelter. Okay, if you go down to Vicksburg, Mississippi, all right, they had a big Civil War battle there in 1864, and you go into the Confederate graveyard, at least one out of every four of those graves are black Confederates. But you'll never hear a word about it.
Wait. You're saying black people served in the Confederate Army?
Yes, one in every four of those graves are black.
Why would they do that when the South was enslaving them?
Because they knew that the North was using them. And what they were doing, they fought voluntarily with the Southern soldiers, the white Southern soldiers. Another thing I want to point out, Miss Davis, President Davis's wife, um, she had a black servant, and after the Civil War, she was on a ship with 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 the black butler. Now he did not have to serve her after the Civil War, and a man walked up to Miss Davis and made a smart remark, and the servant reared back and hit and knocked the hell out of the person that made the remark. And so that says a lot right there. Um, the man was free to go. He stayed. Now I live about from his President Jefferson Davis's plantation. I live about 60 miles from his plantation.
Is that it, or Verena Davis,
Yes.
First
Now
Lady of the Confederate
he,
States?
yeah, he actually had two wives. The first wife died of malaria, and then he married his second wife. Now, if you go to the map and you look under Morehead, Mississippi, Morehead, Mississippi is that town is basically the old Davis plantation.
Okay. All right. Well,
I've met President Davis.
really?
Yes.
Well,
Uh,
tell us about it.
well, his son Joe fell off a balcony about 3 or 4 days before I was to meet him. So he's very, I didn't get to really talk to him directly. Um, I went to his house and he was in mourning because he had just lost his son. Uh, but he gave me an order and he told me that for me to bring help, that there was a dark force that's getting ready to come over to the land. So I do have a rather unusual request, well, an unusual order. I've been ordered by the President of the Confederate States of America to send for help.
And so that help was at Montauk.
Yes, and it was denied. So we have a legitimate president, President Jefferson Davis, that has requested help, and Montauk turned their back on him, and they assisted President Lincoln.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a very twist in history there. And you said that some people have had memories in their past lives where the South actually won the Civil War, but they changed timeline before, I guess, they incarnated or something like that.
No, it's the Mandela effect. If you watch the movie, The Mandela Effect, that is very true. They did the same thing. They went back in time. Nelson Mandela died in prison, but they went back and they altered time. And then this is some of his mess going on now.
Hmm.
Now, Nelson Mandela's wife, Minnie, uh, she takes a car tire, fill it with gasoline. They put it over the shoulders of their victims, and he light it. All right, she is known for that. She's a radical. All right, what's happening in South Africa is that the 5 million white people that are in South Africa, the farmers are being murdered. All right, within 15 or 20 years, that'll be happening over here. And so what you have an invasion of people coming up from North Africa into Europe. You also have a lot of them that are coming over and coming up through Mexico and entering the United States. Now, when Title 42 ends next week, it's projected that you're going to see upward to 15,000 illegal aliens crossing daily within the United States. 15,000 a day. We can't uh, sustain that. This timeline is unstable. And if we get to arguing amongst ourselves in the Southwest, then China and Russia is going to get paranoid, and that's when they shoot the nuke off, because we're arguing amongst ourselves. We have nuclear weapons, and we are a danger to the world, to the security of the world.
Yeah, but it's usually the Americans who did the first strike.
James, all I can tell you is when I went with John Titter, is that there's not one pane of glass in the United States that's not broke. The sonic boom. You have people who have the eardrums are busted. They can't hear. You have gangs of people running around cannibalistic wise. Okay. Uh, it's a Mad Max it's a Mad Max scenario. It's the worst thing that you can believe. And the government's building all these underground bases. I've been in those underground bases. I've been with Phil Schneider before he was murdered. I know what's on those underground bases. And you're not going to go down there and stay 2 or 3 years and pop back up. There's nothing to pop back up to.
Well, so they're going to be down there for a couple of generations, probably, is what you're saying.
I'm saying that it's a it's a bad idea. Now, when they're going to shoot a missile up to Canada, it's going to hit the tar sands up there. Once that radioactive oil gets up into the stratosphere, it clogs up all the filters. It doesn't matter if you have a face mask. The oily radioactive oil is going to clog up the filters. All right, it's going to
What,
get on the plant
what
food.
wouldn't it affect them too in Russia and China?
Yes, they're fighting over the fields, they're fighting over the food. People are starving to death. One thing that this great reset is going to do, there's not going to be any superpowers left. There's not going to be a China. There's not going to be a Russia. There's not going to be a United States. There's not going to be a United Kingdom. Everything changes. Our population is going to go from 8 billion people. It's going to get down to about 145 million. And it seems to stabilize at 145 million. And then it slowly rises back up and it gets to about 500 million and then it stops.
Oh, Well, I don't really like this timeline, but you know what? Let's try to. So if we rescue this vessel, the sphere, how will that change the timeline to positive?
First of all, the tall whites, as far as the computer that's in the spacecraft, I trust the tall whites because they've never done anything to harm me. Um, Now they're kind of, they've signed an agreement not to interfere, but they signed that agreement not to interfere with governments. They did not sign that on an individual basis. So I'm thinking they might allow me to negotiate with them. They probably wouldn't negotiate with the United States. They're not going to do that. They've already signed a contract, but they don't have a contract with me. So my proposal is to unlodge the vessel, fly it to Area 51, turn it over to the tall white warriors, tell them what is going on, that Montauk has catered to certain politicians, that we need to reset the time back before anybody tampered with it, and to get the cookie off the computer. I want to reset everything back where no one's interfered with the Civil War, nobody's interfered with World War II, and uh, I want more responsible people over this time travel. I believe we have a future in time travel, and I believe we have a
Yeah,
future in
but
outer space.
the timeline shows that when the North won, it was more positive, right? I mean, look how technologically advanced we are.
And look what you got, a man wearing a dress up in up in Washington D.C. You got transvestites stealing luggage. Okay,
So
all
when the
right.
South won, the country had more morals, is what you're saying?
Yeah, the country had more morals. This country has this timeline. They have no morals. We have become our own test subjects. Okay, it's time. That's why the aliens won't talk to us. So we need to bring back. We need to show them that we have an intelligence here, that we're not yet ready for time travel. We need some people to guide us, and we need to get this politics out of Camp Hero. We need to get the politics out of Nellis Air Force Base. We need to keep things where they belong. What
Well,
happens at Nellis stays at Nellis.
so I've reached out to the tall whites, and through channeled means, they relayed back to me that they indeed signed a contract with Eisenhower to protect us from nukes, and then that was also reconfirmed with JFK. So, um, do you still think that maybe they're not going to help us after all?
James, I know that in 2027 the contract expires. Okay. Now that's not long from now. All right.
So you're saying there's a chance we could still have this in 2027?
Yes. What I'm saying is, when the contract expires in 2027, the Elders would probably be out of distance by then. We need to do it while it's in distance, and so August of next year, the Elders would be close enough where we can jump it. So we need to make our mind up. Are we going to, jump the Eldridge, unstick this craft, and get it to Area 51 where it can be studied,
Okay.
and explain to the tall whites what's going on.
Okay, so what about an exact date? Now I know you've already told me that you're hesitant to give out the exact date, but we've been going back and forth, and there were multiple projects, so we apparently nobody really knows the exact date, unless maybe the military, who was
Well,
back in
you,
1983.
you,
Anyone
ha-
is left on that?
you have to remember you have leap year in there. Okay. Uh, you have to remember that it comes back, but at a slower rate. like I said, you throw a rock into a pond, the rings get a little slower when they get a little further out. Brookhaven would know the date. If not, someone at Area 51 would know. There's nobody at Camp Hero. Camp Hero is deserted right now, okay? Uh, the closest that I can do this is to get it rammed up on the beach by Brookhaven.
Hmm.
So it's been done before. We get an antenna up, send the signal back out, and teleport. That's nothing big. It can be done there, but it has to have the approval of people up in power. And
Well, what about like, I mean, we discussed the military getting involved. If the military gets involved, that means that they're going to censor everything, block the whole area off, prevent people from
yes,
taking pictures.
yes.
But if we get private companies involved, maybe like Bigelow Aerospace, and ask them for assistance, maybe we can bring in film crews in there and document it so people can be aware of what's going on their planet.
Well, I do believe it needs to be documented, but it has to be under the control of the tall whites. The tall whites are going, what I would think, we're not ready for time travel, okay? Because this instance was happening out at Camp Hero. If the tall white says, fine, let's document it, make it public, I'm all for it. But if the tall whites say, no, we don't feel that's proper, then I want to go with whatever they say if they're willing to offer the help. But we're going to need a private industry. Maybe Raytheon Corporation would be a good one. I've flown some of their advanced craft of the Raytheon down at Barksdale Air Force Base. I've flown one of their craft down there. Um, I worked for the old EG&G Corporation. I want to get a contractor that services either a radar tower at one of these air bases to come in. But uh, we're definitely going to need medical personnel because, like I said, whatever timeline I bring the crew back to, they're going to need medical help. These are Americans. These are
How,
Americans
how
trapped in
many?
a loop.
Do you think we could save them so they don't get embedded in the hull?
Yes,
And
yeah,
how many people were on that vessel? Officers.
James. I counted 5 trapped into the metal. All right, that was just 5 trapped. The If you stay below the deck inside the metal part of the ship, you have some protection from the radiation. Okay, if you get out on the deck where the green light is at, the green light's real hard on you. Okay, um, when I came off of it, my skin was black and blue. I was black and blue all over. I swelled up. I was very dehydrated. My electrolytes in my stomach weren't right. Um, I had to have plasma put in all 4 of my limbs, both arms and both legs. I came very close to dying. So you need to be in the hull of the ship. It will give you some protection. But if I was to go out and get on the deck of it, I would have to have a suit. It'd probably have to be suited, heated up. I mean, but as long as they're before anything disengaged, they're normal. Except when you disengage it, that's when it's going to get really cold. Once you disengage it, you're coming out of hyperspace.
All right. And from the shore, you probably see maybe a flash of light, but you won't actually see the ship itself because they were successful at getting physical invisibility. But you might see like a wake in the water or the ship.
What you would see if you got in a helicopter or either got a drone up in the sky. If you went out into the sea area, you see a dark outline of a ship hull. You'll see it in the water, but you won't see anything above the water. Okay. And if I drove this ship up onto the sand, you would see the movement of the sand, the pointed part of the ship hitting the beach. That's what I want to do. I want to since everything is not run by a computer on the ship. It's run by turbines. What I can do is just ram this ship up on the beach, and then once it's on the beach, I can try to dislodge the spear. Once the spear is dislodged, then they can go on and get the men off of it. Okay. It's kind of like you see a bird, he lands on a high powered power line, he doesn't electrocute. But if he reached over and put his foot on the ground, you'd be fried. Okay. Just cause you see a bird on a power line and you say, well, why didn't he get shocked? Because he's not grounded. Okay.
Well, so this Facebook user, there are multiple Philadelphia experiments. So I think that was it Preston or Al Bielek who said that? But
There was multiple. I'm familiar with August 12th, 1943 date, but you have to remember, you have to tie in leap year with it. So when you move forward, it throws the calculation off a little bit.
all right. Okay, so yeah, so if you know anybody or if you yourself have connections with some group that might be able to assist with a recovery operation on the USS Eldridge, send me an email to info@supersoldiertalk.com and I will shoot it over to Jimmy Paine. Yeah, so let's see, what else was there anything else we need to discuss? There was a researcher in Long Island who was trying to expose the Montauk project, and he got really close he got evidence, and then they made him go insane. You want to
Yeah,
discuss that?
there was a UFO incident that happened in the park there. Uh, there's a park about 5 miles from Brookhaven. And what happened was um, they were doing a teleportation experiment at Brookhaven, and they had a stealth plane up in the sky. You couldn't see; it's up real high, and they were teleporting some crate uh, from the um, from the aircraft down into Brookhaven, and something occurred, and they had an explosion. It blew out the side of the wall of the Brookhaven um, building, and the craft ended up going down into a park. And so what happened was there was a UFO group on Long Island, and a man by the name of Ford, who was over that UFO group, uh, kept pestering everybody and just would not stop. And they ended up committing him to an insane asylum. Um, so, that goes back. There's a certain way you need to approach the people at Brookhaven. You don't need to go down there and rant and rave and carry on. Courtesy would bring you further than accusations in life, James. Um, but
So the point of bringing this up is that we want help from the proper authorities, but we also don't want them to target us to try to shut it all down because there's something more important at stake here. We should all be working together instead of trying to find reasons to hate each other, which is
we
usually
have we have Americans that are trapped on a ship. They have no sense of time, and I can understand that we all have our to think about security here. And, we don't want to broadcast too much. We don't want any Chinese or Russians hanging around. We want to go through proper channels, and we want to dislodge this spacecraft, and we want it to be put into the proper hands for study. So that's what I'm proposing tonight, is that I want to get the crew off the ship. If we can't bring them back to 1943, let's give them new identities. We can find a place in society for them, but we don't need to abandon anybody like that.
But wait, hold on a second. According to Wikipedia, the USS Eldridge continued to exist until like the mid 1955 or so. So, if the Eldridge is stuck in time, did that mean it eventually it came back, or did they create a copy and just change the name and to hide that it disappeared?
James, when Eldridge was first built, it has to go through a testing period. In other words, before it's turned over to the Navy, they have to test the ship first. Now, instead of putting regular Navy crew on the ship, what they did, they took Coast Guardsmen. Now, the duty of the Coast Guardsmen is to guard the shores of the United States. So what they did to test the propellers, to test the engine, everything, they turned it over to the Coast Guard for several days there, and the Coast Guard took it out, powered up the motors, made sure the blades, the propellers didn't vibrate, made sure that the motor didn't blow a gasket. Because once this is turned over to the Navy, that thing would be out in the sea, hundreds of miles from shore. Okay, so it was with the Coast Guard that this happened. That the real crew of the Eldridge are the Coast Guardsmen, and Lieutenant Alexander Cameron was the officer. Now he is kin to also Edwin Cameron, who is MK Ultra doctor from Montreal, Canada, and he's also some type of kin to James Cameron, the movie producer that made was Aliens. He also produced that. I think that's something like his great uncle. So it goes back. Lieutenant Alexander Cameron, he's looking at his watch, and what may be 5 minutes to him is 50 years to us. He doesn't have perception of time. If I can get back on there, and I've met Lieutenant Alexander Cameron, I can get back on there and get in and bring this ship on in. And if the Navy wants to take it and cut it up with a torch, fine. If they want to go ahead and give these Coast Guardsmen new identities, that's fine with me. If they don't want to make a movie, that's fine with me. I want that to be left up to the tall white warriors, or either the little grays, whoever Area 51 would be willing to give me some assistance, because I do not want to go through a nuclear war, and we're just not ready for time travel, and I blame this all on Montauk here. They never should start tinkering with the time, and because this ends real bad.
Yeah,
A lot of people die.
I know, but I don't want to go back to the South winning the Civil War. Then we won't be as technologically advanced. Maybe
James,
maybe there's another alternative option.
James, having a planet void of 8 billion people is not desirable either.
So, but you said when the South won the Civil War, they still got nuclear weapons eventually.
But James, what I'm saying is we have become the test subject. That's why that aliens won't talk to us because we're part of the test now. You're part of the test. I'm part of the test. Part of an intelligence test is to go up there and say, we know what's going on. We want to set it back, and we want to bring everything back the way it was. We never should have tampered with time here.
Yeah, but okay, so let's just say you were successful at this. What about us right now on our communicate? Would everything change?
Yes, James, everything would change.
Would we
The
remember that we had this conversation?
James, we would probably have something similar to the Mandela effect. There'd be some people who will remember this conversation tonight. There'll be some that won't remember. Okay, if you watch the movie, The Mandela Effect, that's what will occur here. Um, Everything would change back to the way it was. But do you really want to live in a society where people are walking around, males are walking around with dresses on, they're molesting little children? Do you really want to live?
Well, even if the South won the Civil War, people are still going to be people. They're still going to do that.
But James, this is not our timeline, okay? This is not our real timeline. We're living in a matrix here, okay? It is a structured matrix. Um, we're living in a
Simulation,
dreamland,
a simulation.
a simulation here. And I want to say this, I'm a spiritual person. All right. When I say spiritual, when I had my extraterrestrial encounter, I couldn't go to a church because I could see all through that. So I took the religion of the Native American Paiute, okay, and the Catholic Church. You know, you look up, you see all these priests that are raping little children. Uh, we've just become too corrupt, and I want to say something. There is an evil out there, and it doesn't like humans. All right, it doesn't mean us well.
Yeah, I think that's the negative AI timeline.
Exactly.
Is trying to make us all gender neutral because AI doesn't have a gender, so it's making us comply to
Yeah,
the belief
it's
system.
we want to get away from that, and we want to live in a society where we can keep our doors unlocked at night. We want to be able to walk down the street and say, "Hey, how are you doing?" without somebody running up, hitting you with a bat in your head. Um,
Yeah, but surely even on that other timeline, not everything's perfect over there.
No, but everything is natural. This is not the correct timeline.
Okay,
Okay, we're living
well,
in a simulation.
let's. I want to show a few pictures before we call it a night here. But we've got. Sorry for the resolution, but this is Phil Schneider's father, and this is Valiant Thor
Yes,
on the
I've
US
I've met
Eldridge.
him before. He's an extraterrestrial. Now, put him back up just for a second. You remember when the Pentagon got hit by the 9/11 incident?
Yeah, they destroyed the Office of Naval Investigations.
Guess who was supposed to be at work that day? That man that you see in the circle. He had called in sick that day, or he didn't show up that day, and that area that was totally destroyed, it would have killed him.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was where all the white hats were stationed over at the Pentagon.
yeah, I've met him before. He's a real nice fellow. Um, I've worked under him, and I've worked under Captain Schneider there.
Okay, so Valiant Thor. So you can confirm he actually was from Venus.
Yes, now he's got one lung um, instead of two lungs, one large lung, from what I understand.
Okay, and just to confirm, so Venus actually is loaded with like breathable atmosphere.
I've been on Venus. Yes, you can breathe on Venus.
I know, but it's supposedly like 800 degrees.
Well, I mean, I've been in a building on Venus. I didn't say I was outside Venus. I've been on Venus is what I was
Oh,
saying, but I've
okay.
been in a building there.
So, but are you saying that NASA has lied to us about what's on Venus, or is it actually tropical? Like,
James, before I'm going to try to weigh my words here. Um, I'm not going to accuse anybody of lying. What I'm going to say is that what I experienced is very different from what NASA is saying. There's actually oxygen on Mars, but it's kind of like at a very high altitude that you.
it's like
But
being at 12,000 feet.
yeah, now they'll tell you, well, there's no oxygen on Mars. Well, how does a helicopter fly if there's no oxygen? So how are they flying the drone around on Mars? There's no oxygen, so they can't explain that. Okay. Uh, and like I said, Duncan of Finland, been on Mars with Duncan before, so you can definitely breathe there. I've been on the moon. You can breathe on the moon, but you
Yeah,
have to go in
we
through decompression for a couple of days.
yeah,
It's like a diver.
and
You have to
avoid getting the
decompress.
parasites. Because you said they got a parasite in
There's
your.
parasites in the dust. Yes, I've had a parasite on me that they had to give me chemo to make it drop off.
Okay, so I want to show you this picture. This is so it looks like, black and white, 1940s perhaps, and we see a guy in here, and he's wearing this strange outfit, and he's got looks like a camera.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
do you think this is like fake or photoshopped or?
I don't think it's fake. Because that's how we fit in. We'll just take a time jump. So you try to fit in. You don't want to change anything. You want to go and study. A real good Montauk boy is going to go. He's going to observe. Okay. Um, that's what I really liked about the time travel is that it was like I was like it's teaching me things. Okay. And I've always thought, if why couldn't we why couldn't we uh bring back and advance our medicine? Okay. um we our hospitals, there's no need for people to die. I mean, we could have a very advanced medical system if we just used it right. we
Well,
we could get rid of wars if we used it right. We didn't do that.
yeah, they're still suppressing the med bed technology, which would stop aging. Well, not only stop, it would re-age people back to the 20s or 30s if they so desire, and it would create a population problem.
Well,
Is-
I've seen a woman that was 120 years old. She was playing tennis, and to look at her, she didn't look a bit over 60 years old. So we have the technology to do that. And I want to say something else. They have the technology to keep you from getting depressed. They can give you a shot. It lasts for about 2 years, and you don't have depression. We have that at Area
Well,
51.
that sounds like something that might have been part of Resident Evil. So I don't know if I would. It's actually, if you've seen the new Resident Evil series,
Well,
but in South Africa.
I've been to Raccoon City. That's Dulce, New Mexico. I actually been there on
Okay, okay,
Resident Evil, so
all right,
I'm familiar with that. Go ahead.
okay, okay. Well, I guess we're pretty much done here today. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss? Oh, actually, we have a question from an audience member, a really good one.
Okay.
Um, did you know Ezekiel, the black reptilian at Camp Hero?
I don't know if his name was Ezekiel, but I knew that there was a reptilian there. Um, we I brought a toolbox out. We had something that broke, and when I put a can of drain up on the table, and the reptilian, he grabbed it and turned it upside down and drank it like a Coca-Cola, and he enjoyed it. And we just looked, me and Preston just looked at each other. We couldn't believe it. And but he was a nice guy. The reptilian there. I've talked to him. I'm going to say this. I don't really get along with reptilians that much, but the ones that I do get along with, they're super cool. So that guy was super cool there.
Yeah, and so when Phil Schneider was recruited, he was over at Area 51. There was a reptilian there that no one would want to communicate with, or he wouldn't want to communicate with anybody. So Phil Schneider offered, so why don't I just go in there? And then they said, oh, you really think you can make a difference? And they let him go in there, and he had like some special environment that they had to be in. But he was successfully able to communicate with reptilian. That's one of the ways he started getting recruited.
I was there when that happened. When me and Phil used to run together. Okay, Phil was my best friend, and I miss him so much, But yeah, I was there with Phil when Phil asked, could he go in there and talk to the guy, and but I was on outside looking in the glass when Phil went in there. And it did happen just like you said, But it was so sad when I found him, and he had been murdered. And I would like to see justice be served on that. And in fact, if I make it back out to Area 51, I'm going to make an effort to bring that back up and see that justice is served here, because we definitely need to correct the timeline, and I want to hold these people responsible. But they're walking us into a nuclear war. They have no use for us now.
Right. Well, that's too bad. Okay, well, let's go ahead and call it a night. Thank you, or a day, wherever you may be, and thank you, Jimmy Paine. Thank you, listeners. So let's see here. If you like to learn more about this particular channel, why don't you go ahead and subscribe? Make sure you go over to Rumble and subscribe over there. The full database is over there because I'm still being censored. This is the backup channel on YouTube, but also go to my website, supersoldiertalk.com. There's a link to my book, Lone Wolf, and you can learn more about some of the secret space program and super soldier alignment projects. Also, I've got a chapter here about Montauk as well, at least some of the things that I recovered from my memories. But yeah, and also go to my other website, neologicaltech.com. Get yourself a meditation cube to help you relax, and yeah, there you have it. Well, let's try. You know what, Jimmy? Let's bring you on again, maybe in sometime in February. We can give you all an update, and also let's do a show to talk about your Martian experiences, because we haven't really gone into that. And yeah. All right. Any other final comments? We've got a great interview tonight. Thank you, Christy. And we've got from Diane. Thank you, Jimmy and James. Thank you very much. Got some kisses from Sarah. We've got some so hearts. The kisses from Chickadee. We've got thank you, James and Jimmy. You're very welcome, Danabelle. All right, and Dane. May y'all have a great day or night wherever y'all be, and let's call it. So, all right. Please consider supporting Super Soldier Talk by purchasing your own Neo Meditation device. Your Neo Meditation device will help you reduce stress, integrate trauma, enhance intuition, enhance clairvoyance, and enhance creativity. Get yours now at www.neologicaltech.com.